and welcome to another episode of the Tell Nut Show. As always, we're your hosts. We have the wonderful and fabulous Kirsha Fox, author of the Deception and Justice series. Um, she's an homeschooling mom of four, avid reader and gamer.
And my co-host is Julia J.K. Allen, author, editor, and author coach. She is a fantasy and horror author who loves to put magic in everything. Thank you so much for joining us. Our guest today is Tong Ge, who was born and raised in China. She came to Canada in the late 80s. She has written since 2012, publishing award-winning poems, prose, and short stories in both English and Chinese. Her debut novel, The House Filler, was published in 2023 and is critically acclaimed.
Yes. Welcome to the show. Thank you so
Yes,
much.
we're so excited to have you.
Me too. Thank you.
Yeah, so tell us a little bit about your author journey. What got you started in writing, and what does it look like for you so far?
I wanted to be a writer since in junior high. But before that, I was already a storyteller. So I was born and raised in China and went through the Cultural Revolution when I was a child. At the time, there's very limited books that were available, either fiction or nonfiction. It's just like there was a culture desert actually during the Cultural Revolution. But my father was very good and very familiar with Chinese literature, especially ancient Chinese literature and history. And when I was 7 years old, it was the first time I heard the story from a book called The Strange Stories from a Chinese Studio. That was written by a Qing Dynasty writer, Hu Songling, and he spent all his life, about 40 years, to write these short story collections, and was nearly 500 stories. So that from that time on, I wanted to not only listen to stories, but wanted to tell stories myself. Then when I was in junior high, I decided I wanted to be a writer one day, but that was like long time ago. Then when I went to college, I wanted to study either Chinese literature or journalism, but my parents were strongly objected my idea because at that time, become a writer was still dangerous or considered risky occupation because you could be in trouble for something you have written. So they forced me dropped that idea and I studied finance and banking instead for my bachelor's. Then after working in China for 3 years, I came to Canada and obtained my master's degree in agriculture economics, which has nothing to do with creative writing. But then in 2004, when I was on disability leave, I decided to start writing this novel about my family. So the book is based on my family's story of, my family of 3 generations. And and that was the time, like actually I started it in 2004, first in Chinese, but then I realized for two reasons I couldn't continue. One was my physical disability because I still have repetitive strain injuries on both arms, so typing was extremely hard for me. And also I realized that if I write in Chinese, I couldn't get any help, right? Like how do you get feedback?
Right.
So then I stopped for 2 years, started in 2006. I started to take creative writing classes and courses and joined critique groups and started to write the story in English. So it's almost 20 years for me to finish this big, long book. I finished at the end of 2018. Then I couldn't find a publisher, and I didn't know why, because the length was over 240,000 words. Eventually, a mentor of mine told me it was too long. You have to divide it. So now it's been divided into 3 books, and The House Filler is the first book of the trilogy. So that's my writing journey in a nutshell. Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I think a lot of us can relate to kind of not exactly the extent of the struggle, because like you said, writing was a dangerous thing, but the idea of your parents wanting you to do one thing when you I have a passion for writing, and it doesn't always feel practical to become a writer. So I think a lot of people can relate to that part of your story too.
Yeah, it was a long struggle because English is my second language. Right? I didn't come
Yeah.
to Canada until I was in my late 20s. So it's extra difficult. To write fiction is difficult enough.
Mm,
To write it in the second language, it was extremely difficult.
I
Yeah,
can't
I
imagine.
can imagine. Yeah. Right.
because in Chinese, our grammar is much, much simpler than in English. For instance, we only have one tense. We only have current tense. We
Mm,
don't have past tense or past future tense or past perfect. We only have one tense. So even though theoretically I knew what tense I should use, but as you write, you forgot, right? So I
right.
couldn't do that
Right.
consistently. We don't have plurals. We only have singular.
Mm,
Our
mm,
verb doesn't change with a subject. We say I do, you do, he do. We don't say he does. Um,
mm.
so many, and the preposition was also extremely hard for us because there's no rules to follow.
Yeah, yeah. No, I know in a lot of Asian languages they don't have articles and different things that we just like use so naturally, and it's you have to that's another thing you have to think about when you're writing in English when it's not your first language of all the stuff that's not in your language and you have to fill it in. It can be very tricky.
Exactly. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah.
And I personally relate to the story gets too big because the same
Mm.
thing happened to me. My draft was too big. So it's now divided into 4 books.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
It happens. The story
Yeah.
just keeps getting bigger. It's either that or cut it down, which is so hard to do. You're like, no,
Mhm.
that story needs to get told.
Exactly. Because when you divide it, you can't, even when you divide it, you cannot just like cut it through and clean, right? It's like
Yes, yes.
it's like this. You have to,
Mhm.
yeah, it's hard.
Separate the
Each,
layers.
each book
Yeah,
needs its own
exactly.
arc, its own.
Yeah.
It's
Yes.
not the easiest thing. So you said this the house filler was based on your family story. What genre is it?
It's a historical fiction.
Hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, because it's based on the first book is based on my grandmother's story. So the
Mm.
time span was between 1920 and 1966. Make it a historical fiction.
Okay.
Sure,
Can I
sure.
ask, were you tempted to make it like purely biographical? What made you want to make it like a historical fiction instead?
Because I want some freedom
Ah,
Mm,
yes.
in the
mhm.
creative process, and also I don't know all the details of her life.
Hmm.
And
Right.
yeah, for biography or creative nonfiction, you need to know all the details that I don't. I think it's extremely hard to write a historical
Mhm.
story into nonfiction. It's unless you know all the details, it's pretty
Hmm.
hard.
Right. Right.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, and there's freedom and like you would say it's kind of freeing to write the fiction part of it too because you can still tell a true story without knowing word for word what everyone was saying. Yeah.
exactly.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah,
Historical fiction is so very tricky because you want to make sure that it is as accurate as possible, down to geography and what was happening during certain days and where. And
Mhm.
um, oh goodness, like it
yeah.
to me,
Not
it
an
feels like
easy thing to
overwhelming
write.
amounts of research.
Yeah,
Mhm.
you have to do tons of research, and but thanks to the internet, because without internet, I think it's way more difficult to do the research.
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
I I was able to purchase the photocopies of the old newspaper were published in the 20s and 30s and 40s.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
So some part of story like was directly from the newspaper. I just need to change the
Mm.
name and location, and it was so neat. And I also traveled back to China in 2015 and went back to
Mhm.
my grandmother's hometown and met a whole bunch of relatives and did the research there.
Oh, what a
Yeah,
wonderful journey for your story. Yeah, I love
yeah.
that. So, tell us a little bit about your writing process. What does it look like going from the idea to the finished novel?
I'm not an outliner. Because the whole story is in my head. My mother has been telling me her family story ever since I was a child. So I've been listening to this while I was growing up. So it was in my head, and I'm not a outliner, but I still outlining it in my head, right? I just
Mm.
start to write. So I had a full-time job, and my job was a commission, still is commission based. So I have flexibility. I don't have
Mhm.
to be there from 9 to 5, but I usually go to work at about 9:30, 10 o'clock, and stay there until like 9 p.m. Uh,
Mm.
doing my job. Then after 9 o'clock in the evening, I start to write. Usually, I wrote until 12 a.m. or even sometimes 1 a.m., 2 a.m. So other people said, "Wow, that has to be so hard for you." I said, "Well, you know what? After 9 o'clock, it was my happy hour because
Mhm.
that sustained me, be able to do this day after day. Because creative writing was so rewarding and so interesting.
Mhm.
So yeah, that was my happy hour. I like for the whole day. I'm looking forward to 9 o'clock in the evening.
To write. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I have done
No,
that.
it is.
Yeah,
Yes. When we're so passionate and we love it so much, it just feels like it gives us our energy. Yeah,
yeah.
to
It's
write.
become a
Mhm.
game, a play. It's no longer work, right?
Right.
It does. It does. It's what you do for
Yeah.
you.
Yeah,
Yes. Right.
that's
Right.
right. Yeah,
Everything. Every other part of the day is for everyone else, but the writing time is for us. Yeah.
yeah,
Yes. Even when we're ripping our hair out in frustration, like it's still our favorite thing.
yeah.
Yeah.
And the
Yeah.
rewarding is so much bigger than your day job. You do your day job, but it's not your passion. It's not like you. Yeah,
Right. And you don't have a book at the end you can hold up and say, I did this. Yeah.
exactly. Yeah.
So for you, what is the most important part of writing?
I think the most important part is to put words on paper. I think the most important part is the first draft, because I have know so many people. They tell you they have this great idea, they have this their family story, or they know a wonderful story. They've been telling you like for years, but like start put words on the paper.
Right.
If you don't do that, idea, you cannot sell idea. Other people don't know your idea, except a very few around you, but that doesn't, it doesn't get the story spread. Spread.
Mhm.
So I think that's start is most important thing. One day, just they said you sit in front of your table, you get your computer, you just start to write. I think that's the most important part.
Yes, just starting. It's
That's
one of the hardest things to do, but it is very true. If we don't have anything written, we can't share it with the world.
Yeah,
mhm.
Yeah.
yeah. But once you start, you start to have a sense of accomplishment. Even if you only wrote five
Yes.
pages, that's your creative
Mhm.
work. You made it happen. You start to create your
Yeah.
world and think about it. Like in creative writing, you're like a god. You can decide who lives, who dies.
Yes.
Right. Right. Complete control. Yes.
Mhm.
That's
Yes.
right. Yeah.
Especially I write fantasy, so even more so, it's like I create the whole world and all the rules and the whole culture
Mhm.
and the history. It's all just whatever I want it to be. And it's a little bit hard to be the decider, because there's a part of me that
Yeah.
wants to ask permission of other people, like, hey, can I
Mhm.
do it this, and like I don't have to ask permission. I'm the only one who decides, but also I bear the responsibility for all of that too.
Right.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
But
So, for you, do you think characters or plot is more important?
I think characters are more important. Because when you
Mhm.
think about it, you can read a wonderful commercial fiction, and
Mhm.
after a few years, like I don't even remember the plot unless if the
Right.
character is very memorable. I remember the characters in the book years after, but I
Mm.
normally don't remember plots.
mhm.
So
Right. Right. That's very true.
That
yeah,
is very true. You're like, "Oh, I love that book." And they're like, "What is it about?" And you're like, "I don't remember.
No
It's one,
idea.
but
yeah,
I really
But
liked the
that
main
character,
characters."
yeah.
yeah. But
Yeah.
think
No,
about
it's
it,
very
when
true.
you remember characters, some you can remember some of the plots because
Mhm.
oh, this person did
Mhm.
this or this person suffered that. You remember a
Mhm.
little bit. If it's pure commercial fiction, like characters, if characters are not so memorable, like you don't remember
Mm.
anything. I don't even remember the
Right.
name of the protagonist.
Right, right. I think, yeah, and I also think that like characters are who we fall in love with, right? So for me, I always love getting to know my characters. That's the most exciting part of, because I feel like when you have a plot, it can be so-so plot. Books can still be good, right? But
Yeah,
when you have so-so characters, it's very hard for the book to be good.
Mhm.
exactly. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, I would agree with you.
totally.
Yes,
Mm,
yes.
my personal experience has been that when I know my characters well enough, they tell me their
Mhm.
stories as if it happened.
Right.
You know, they become a louder voice and they tell
Mhm.
you what they would do in that situation. So it makes writing a
Right.
lot easier.
That's true.
Yeah,
I heard
yeah.
so many people say that.
Do you have a favorite author, and what do you think they do best?
I have too many favorite authors. It's a long list.
Mhm.
But if I have to pick and choose, I think my earliest influence was a Chinese author in the 1920s and 30s. His name was Lu Xun. He was only essayist, and he wrote essays and short stories. He has never written a novel, but
Mm.
his work was so influential because his writing was sharp, um, insightful, deep, and he biting, and he never hesitated to critique, the old
Mm.
tradition, the Chinese government at the time, and dark side of the human nature. And his work has been influencing like Chinese writers and the intellectuals for generations. And
Mhm.
his most famous writing, is a short story. The title is the True Story of AQ. AQ is the protagonist in the story. And the Nobel Prize winner Mo Yan is another Chinese writer. This person won 2012 Nobel Prize for literature. He said that he'd rather trade all his works for a single story, like the true story of AQ.
Hmm.
Mm.
Yeah, but this is the first one. I would say the next person or writer influenced me the most is Ayn Rand, right?
Oh, yeah.
Because when we're talking about you know literary fiction usually is character driven, and commercial fiction is usually plot driven. But now there's a new word called the up market, right? You're supposed to have both, and that is so hard to do. But I think in all Ayn Rand's books, he could put a very well developed, strong characters in a very well crafted plots. So I think that is so hard to do, and but also I think she waved her philosophy into her writing, right? That
Mhm.
is that is not easy. The third thing is that we all know that when you create a character, especially for protagonist, right? If your protagonist is sympathetic, your readers like her or like him, cheer for him, and worry about him, and can identify with him. You have created pretty strong, successful protagonist. But I think
Mhm.
the best protagonist, the most successful created protagonists are those who can inspire readers, inspire
Mhm.
you so
Mm.
much that you want to be that person. And I think that's why I like Ayn Rand so much, because after reading The Fountainhead, right, I want to be Howard um, Rock. And if I after reading Atlas Shrugged, I want to be Dagny. So
Mhm.
that's the most successful um, character building, I believe,
Mhm. Mhm.
inspire people. Yeah. So she's the next person who influenced me a lot. This is a long list, right? I can go to
Yes,
keep going, but
I believe
It's
we
it's a
pull
tough
bits and
question, yeah.
pieces from everything we read. It influences us a little bit.
Mhm.
Um, Even if it's like outside our genre, we read something like, oh, they they wrote that very colorfully. I'd like to be more like that. Or just something will
Mhm.
give you a seed of an idea, and it all comes together in a tapestry that only you can put together. But
Yeah, yeah,
those are such good answers.
It's so hard to pick, I know.
Yes.
Favorite authors is kind of like the hardest question.
yeah. Well, another one book, another book I like so much is the
Mhm.
and the quiet flows down, right? Mikhail Shah, I have to Shalikov,
Okay.
Mikhail Shalikov, the Russian writer.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm.
as you said, Kersha, we all can learn from. Doesn't matter which genre, right? We can always learn from
Mhm.
other people. And the
Yes.
way he described the river down was so vivid, so lively, so fantastic, and he
Mm.
had so many passages in this, 4-volume novel describe the river, but you never feel repetitive.
Mhm.
You can't even find the same words. I mean, I was thinking,
Right,
oh,
right.
how could this guy do this? And you
Mhm.
felt he literally lived at the bank of the river down, but he was not. He was a writer. He was not a peasant living,
Right,
in a
right.
setting he described in his book. And his book is like a War and Peace, right? I think everybody know War and Peace. It's so famous, but I think his book is, if not better, at least as good as the War and
Mhm.
yeah, so epic and
Mhm.
complex. I also like
Mhm.
books that is relevant to the time the book
Mhm.
was about or is about, right? So
Mm-hmm.
the time we are talking about, this um, social and political system, the the tradition, the livelihood. I think I
Mhm.
like the books that are relevant. Well, except the science fiction and fantasy, but even sci-fi and fantasy is also relevant, right?
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
You could insinuate the real life, right? Just put in the future, or So I like the books that are relevant. Even science fiction. I found that they always have a time. They tell you, 2090
Mhm.
or 3010 something, right? It's relevant. I have a hard time to like the books that they don't give you the time. They don't
Oh,
give
okay.
you
Yeah.
um they try to almost avoid it to make you guess, okay, when this story
Mhm.
is happening. Okay, if they mention cell phone, oh, you say, okay, this is like happened recently, right? If they,
Mhm. Mhm.
Yes.
like,
I,
why do you do this?
I find it very funny that when people wrote books in the 70s and 80s, but they set it for after 2000s. But I'm
Mhm.
reading this and there's no mention of cell phones. They have someone running outside looking for a payphone. And I had to
Right.
laugh to myself that they couldn't envision what the world would be like, even, 40
Right.
years ahead of time.
Yeah,
How I think how gobsmacked they might be to see just how much it's changed.
yeah,
Um,
Yeah. I think it's very interesting though, because you can look at books like The Crucible, which is written about the Salem witch trials, but it's actually written because of McCarthyism.
yeah.
So he's talking about the witch trials, but in the context of the McCarthy era, which was the big scare where they were blacklisting celebrities and all of that stuff. And so it was like a commentary on what was going on at the time in the 50s and 60s, but it was written as like the 16th, 1600s when the witch trials happened.
Oh,
So
I
mhm.
didn't
I
know
love
that.
books that can, yeah, books that can kind of translate and something that happened in the past, but for a relevant now issue. Yeah,
Yeah,
I love how
Mhm.
books do that. Hmm.
I watched the play. It was so
Yeah,
wonderful.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, it was written because of the McCarthy era too. Yeah,
Oh,
yeah. He
okay.
wanted to make a commentary because with the witch, the hysteria
Which
with the witch
yeah,
trials.
yeah,
Yeah, and he was saying that's what was going on in politics too
yeah.
at the
Mhm.
time.
That's right.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes, I love how dystopian, fantasy, sci-fi, historical
Yes,
fiction can
yes.
hold up a mirror to our
Hmm.
society today and show us not only where
The good,
we've
the
been,
bad.
but where we're
Yeah,
going, and what if, and how
right.
does that look when the shoe is on the other foot. And
Hmm.
um,
Yeah,
I love
that's
reading for that reason.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's the story I was talking about. The book, the collections of short stories, the strange stories from a Chinese studio. The author
Yeah.
insinuated a real life event or real life or environment.
Mm.
Because all these short stories they were fantasies and some horror, but
Mm.
yeah, it's relevant. And the translation of the book, entire translation of the book, just published this year. Yeah,
Mm.
but
Oh wow.
I'm not sure. Yeah.
yeah, but many years ago there was a translation, but only the author only translated about 160 stories. The whole collection was near
Mm.
500, but this time is a complete um, volume of the book. Yeah,
Oh,
That's
how wonderful
exciting.
that that's available now. Yeah.
it's
Yeah. That's
available now. You can
great.
find it on Amazon actually.
Yeah. I'm gonna have to look that up.
Yeah.
What have you learned from the writing process? You in particular, you spent 20 years almost putting this book together. And I know that you wrote poems and other things, other short stories. Um, what, how have you grown because of the writing?
I write better now,
Mm-hmm.
but I think the um, most important lesson is that get feedback, be humble,
Mm. Yeah.
and be
Yes.
patient because this can take a long time. It's always take longer time than you first believed, right? I remember in 2015 when I went back to China, I told all my friends and my university classmates, I said, I will finish my book in a year. That was 2015. I didn't finish until 2018, but after that, I spent another how many years to revise it until like a 2023. So it's always much, it takes much longer time than you first estimated. And be humble because, I heard so many people or writers, they say, okay, nobody recognized my talent. That's why nobody published my book. But I think there's a reason why you need to improve your book. It sounds
Mm-hmm.
hard, but it's a fact, right?
Yes.
The reason I was insisted to find a traditional publisher because I did not know if my book was good enough. Like if nobody tells me, how do I know? I did not know. So I need somebody. I think that's at least for the first book. I needed to know. Okay, at least the book is publishable, right?
Right.
And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, and I think there's people that once you start to give them, like they ask you to read their writing, once you start to give them feedback, they start become defensive. They will
Mm.
tell you why I wrote it this way, why I did that way. Then there's no way you could provide any help, and the book has never been published. I mean,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? You have to be open.
Hmm.
I mean, you don't have to take all the advice you get, all the suggestions you get, but at least open up. Don't become defensive. And my experience is that if one person tells you this part has a problem, you can
Hmm.
ignore it. If two people tells you the same thing, you should really pay attention. If three people tell you the same thing, you definitely need to change it, to revise it.
Hmm.
Something's not right.
Yes.
Right. Right. No, I love that. I always tell people when they get feedback, you just sit with it for a few days. Just think about it and sit with it for a few days because I think you're right that the natural thing to do is be like, no, I did that for a reason and let me
Yeah,
explain it to you. But like you were saying, no one can improve without feedback, right? That's how we
yeah,
get better. That's how we become better writers. So I
that's
love
right.
that of just sit with the comments. You don't have to take everything people say, but yes, if somebody's saying something, we need to think about it.
Yeah.
Be
Mm-hmm.
open minded.
There's another comment I want to make.
Mm-hmm.
It is hard sometimes, especially when you get professional help, like a freelance editors or mentor. They're all professional. They're all very good at what they're doing. But if the two people give you conflict advice,
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the hardest time. At first, I didn't know what to do because
Right, right.
right, I didn't know what to do. So I think it takes time. Like as you said, if you sit aside and set aside, and for a while, eventually you'll go with your heart.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, yes.
But not always like like immediately which one to take, which advice to take. You just have to wait. Sometimes you don't know, or ask more people, say what they say.
Yes, yes,
So
yes.
in Chinese culture, there's a story called the Carry the Donkey. Have you guys ever heard about it?
Mm-mm.
No.
Okay, so talk about a grandpa and a grandson. They will travel together with a donkey. So at first, the grandpa sat on the ride the donkey, and the grandson, because grandson was walking, and then they come up with a group of young people, and they say, "Oh, look
Mm.
at that old guy! How cool he is! Right? He let his grandson walk, and he himself rides a donkey." So they heard about it. So the grandpa got down and got the grandson up. Then they walked another distance and encountered a group of old people. And they say, "Hey, look at that grandson! How
Mm.
uh,
Right.
yeah, nice. He's like the old man walking." So then they figure, what do we do? So they both got on the back of the donkey. They walked another the distance, and they encountered a group of, I'll call them, uh, animal protection.
Yeah,
And
yeah, yeah.
You said, "Oh, look at that poor donkey."
yeah, they said they're
Carrying
so
two
close to the
people,
donkey,
yeah.
right? So guess what? They both got down and they decided to carry the donkey.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, yeah. Oh my gosh.
That's
Oh, that's so
when
cute.
you don't know what to do.
Right, right. So don't let other people influence you too much, right?
That's right. Yeah.
After you got started, I was like, "Oh, I remember the Aesop fable."
Remember
Yes,
this, right? Okay.
yes.
Yeah.
You're not
Okay.
going to please everyone, and your book isn't
Right.
going to be for everyone.
That's right.
Um,
Right.
Yeah. Mhm.
So yes, that's like what I was saying, of feeling like I need to ask permission. Is this good enough? Is it okay
Mm-hmm.
that I did
Mm-hmm.
this? I think it's nice. Traditional publishing can be nice that way because you have experts who help you
Mhm.
get there, help you polish your story. When you're an indie author, you have to do it all yourself and hope, hope that it's good enough.
Yeah.
Right.
Um, and
But
then, but absolutely, I have worked with other authors as an editor or as just a beta reader. And I'm like, hey, there's a problem with this. And several times
Mm-hmm.
they've gotten very defensive. They don't want to be teachable. They are like,
Mm-hmm.
how dare you insult my book baby? Like,
Right.
what are you
Right.
doing? And it's kind of hard to know that they are going to move ahead with that decision and it's not going to be for their best. Their book is not going to be the best it could have been because they are refusing to learn, you know.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and also,
Um,
sorry, go
yeah.
ahead.
That being said, you want to find people who understand your vision, who understand
Yes.
what you're trying to say with your book. I
Mm-hmm.
know a friend who likes to write lots of humor in her books. And one of her readers was like, "What are you doing? This is too much humor. No one's going to take your book seriously if you put too much humor in them." And she says, "No, I want my books to be funny." So
Mm-hmm.
you have to figure out who to listen to and who not to, and what is the story that you're
Right.
trying to tell. But that is excellent, an excellent answer.
Yeah, well, I
Yeah.
have never heard of too much humor. I don't believe there's something called too much humor.
Right. Right. Too much
But
funny is never a bad
um,
thing.
I have hired freelance editors, both
Mm-hmm.
copy editors and structure editors, twice.
Mm-hmm.
Because when I say twice, because I was so not confident about my writing. When I started to write, at
Mm.
first I didn't hire anybody. I just took my writing to the critique group. Then I realized not only they were critique the content, but they start to correct my grammars. And there's so many errors. I'm
Mm-hmm.
thinking, oh, I couldn't do
Mhm.
this to other people, right? I felt embarrassed as well, embarrassed. So I found a copy editor who was willing to do installment editing. So I
Mm-hmm.
wrote every 2 chapters and sent to her. She will do the copy editing. Then I'll present to my critique group. So
Oh,
I
okay.
did
Yeah.
this for my whole book, and then because the feedback you got, then you hire like a manuscript evaluator and
Mm-hmm.
structure editor. Then they give you more feedback. Then you need to change, right? After I made all the changes, I hired the copy editor for second time.
Yes.
I did
Yes.
this for also structure editor and two structure editors went through all the entire book and the two manuscript evaluators. uh,
Mm.
to me, I just need that much help. And I had an excellent relationship to 99% of them.
Yeah, yeah, right. We can't get along with everyone, but that's always nice when we get along with most of them. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm sure it shows in your book. You mentioned
Yeah.
that, your books are critically acclaimed, like you did it.
Hmm.
You made a very good book.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes. Each of mine have had like at minimum 3 different editors just to make
Wow.
sure I'm hitting all of my bases because I really want to put forth
Mm.
the best book I possibly can.
Yeah.
I don't want to spend each of my books have taken about 2 years to do. And
Mm.
why spend 2 years of my life doing a thing if it's not going to be the best it could be?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And also you have to realize once it's in print, you can change it.
Right.
Oh,
Right.
Right.
yes.
So
Once it's printed.
I queried a whole bunch of literary agents and publishers at the end of 2018 and the beginning of 2019. And
Mm.
nobody picked up my book. And now actually I'm grateful for that. Because I
Mhm.
knew if somebody published it, I will regret to death because I was far from
Oh, yeah.
the best I could do. Yeah.
Right, right. You dedicated more time to make it even better. That's great.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you have a favorite part of the writing process?
I would say, you know, first draft,
The first
sitting,
Yeah.
yeah, after work, still sitting in my office in front of the computer. Now I start to create my world. That's the best part.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. How about a least favorite part of writing?
Um, Even though editing is extremely important,
Yes.
I don't like editing.
I think that's a very common answer. I'm an editor, but I don't like editing my stuff. I like editing other people's stuff.
Yeah,
That's much more fun. When it's my stuff, I hate
yeah.
it.
Yes.
Especially like you have to learn how to do self-editing. At first, you don't even know how.
Mm-hmm.
Like you say, "Oh, I have done my best. What can I change?" You
Right,
don't know.
right.
So that's editing. Self-editing is come with the feedback, and
Yes,
self
yes.
feedback is really really hard. Well, after a few years, you may a year or two, you go back, you may find some parts you can improve.
Yes, yes. No,
But if you want to
there's
do it
good to
fast, yeah,
yes, yeah. It's good to take a break so that you kind of see the story as new when you go to edit. So you want to try and forget as much of it as you can so you see it as new. But yeah, I think that editing is probably the least favorite of a lot of a lot of our authors that we interview. But one great thing for a tip for self editing, if you know what you struggle with, that's what I always focus on in editing. So, like for example, I'll do just all dialogue. It's just a wall of dialogue. Nobody's doing anything while they're talking. It's just the words. So knowing that when I go to edit, then I'm like, okay, now I need to add in everything that's going on around the words, right? Everything that's going on. So knowing like I'm not going to be super descriptive the first time around when I go to edit, then I look where can I add description in? Things like that can be
Mhm.
really helpful. So if you're starting out and you don't know how to edit, just think of what's the thing I do not as well as other stuff and look for that specifically. That can be
I
helpful.
feel like we could spend the entire hour just talking about our editing strategies in detail.
Yes, yes, right. How
right.
fun. Uh,
Yeah,
There's
but
so
yeah,
much to it. It's not very simple. So many
it is
layers, so
not.
many
No.
passes. You
Hmm.
have to read your own book so many times.
Right,
and
right.
that's the thing. Like at the end, you come to the point you don't even want to read it anymore.
Right,
Um,
exactly. That's
yes.
that's when you know I'm sending it to the editor because I can't
Yes.
stand to look at it anymore.
Yeah,
Anything but
If
having
I
to
see
read
it
my own book
again, yeah,
again.
I'm gonna rip my hair out. So it's time to send it off. Yeah.
yep.
Do you ever struggle with writer's block?
No, I don't have
Well,
writer's block. My
awesome.
my hands are not fast enough.
Ah, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
That's good. All right. This is my favorite question, but what has been your most significant writing victory so far?
Oh, I would say the
Yes.
publication of my first book and
Mm-hmm.
also
Yeah.
the winning award. It is a
Yes.
2024 independent winner of 2024 Independent Prize Award for new fiction, and is also um, a finalist for the Islands Book Award and for 2024 Canadian Book Club Awards. So
Congratulations.
thank you. The last one, yeah, the Canadian Book Club Awards, the winners will be announced in January. So I still have a chance.
Yes.
There.
Okay, good luck.
Fingers crossed. Yes. Good luck. We're sending you all
Thank
the
you.
good luck for that.
Thank you.
And then our last question is my favorite question to ask. Is there any writing advice that you hate? You think either it's not great advice, can't be applied to everyone, but you just don't like the advice?
I think I don't like the advices that try to give you a formula and ask you to follow. Because I think creative writing, is a creative writing. The most important part is be creative. If I learned so much from writing rules, all that, but some rules to me is a little bit ridiculous. Like for example, they tells you can never start a book with a dream, and you should never start a book when wake up in the morning. When you wake up in the morning, you can only have at most one dream thing in your entire book. You can only have two adverbs in your entire book. You
Right.
can also have an exclamation mark in your book. I'm thinking, right?
Yeah, what are you allowed to write then at that point?
I can find the great books, those I mentioned, right? Like broke all these rules. Like
Yeah.
Alice in the Wonderland, it's a whole thing is a dream. But now they
Yeah.
tell you don't write your story as a dream, because then the readers will feel to be cheated. They would feel to be cheated. I'm thinking, well, how about Alice in the Wonderland? Like, do readers feel cheated? I mean, yeah, and the quiet flows down, right? I found the pages. There's so many exclamation marks, like so many,
Right.
literally, like I can find all these examples. So I think it cannot be too rigid when people start to give you the rules, right? When you think about it, like in a 1800 and even early 1900, there's not too many books on writing, on creative writing. There's no such rules. I didn't hear about this until, right? There were still great books being written. Like you cannot say,
Right.
all the
Yeah.
classics they were written before all these rules came to life. Or so that's a part I'm not convinced. Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's very true. There's a lot of rules, but who's making those rules? Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
All right. We want to give you an opportunity to let people know where they can find out more about you and your books online. So go ahead and share any website, socials, things like that.
Yeah, my book is available on Amazon, Indigo, Barnes and Noble, Walmart, Kobo, and some Canadian independent bookstores, and also in some Canadian libraries. I found in the States some university libraries collect my book. I don't know why. Like most of the libraries that collect my book are university libraries. And I have a website. Is my name tong-ge.com. I'm still learning about social media marketing. I'm not good at it at all. So I don't even.
Yeah, it's not easy. It's not easy for
No,
anyone.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to come sit and talk with us. We've really enjoyed having you.
I have one thing.
Yes,
Yeah, absolutely.
When people search my book, especially I found on Amazon, if they just type in the title, the house filler, they will get a whole bunch of household items. So yeah, people need to put my name there. Like you can put a dash, a hyphen, then house's name. Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much. Yeah, thanks for joining us.
Thank both of you, Krisha and Julia. I really, really appreciate it.
Yes,
it's
it's
been
very
wonderful
nice to
talking
meet
with
you.
you.
We meet the most wonderful people on the show.
Thank you.
And thank you to everyone listening along at home. Remember, there's more than one way up a mountain, and our next episode will air Friday as usual. If you're interested in being a guest on the show, you can find us at The Tell Not Show on social media, or email us at thetellnotshow@gmail.com. Thanks again for watching.
Thanks again for listening. If you enjoyed the show, consider subscribing and liking. We appreciate all the support. Julia J.K. Allen is an author, editor, and coach, and can be found at hijingsrudder.com.
Kirsha Fox is an author, avid reader, gamer, and mother to four, and you can find her at kirshafox.com. Thanks and see you next time.